Hello everybody, and welcome to 10-Minute Nodes, a guide to the visual scripting tool for space engineers. Today, we'll be taking a look at some more of the nodes for the visual scripting tool. Alright, so let's start by looking at Keen's guide. Today we're going to start with the sequence control nodes. So these are nodes that influence the flow of logic through our script. So we'll start out with the branching node. It is sequence dependent. It has one sequence input, two sequence outputs, and a bool comparer value input. For either value of the comparer, only one sequence is chosen. So if we hop over to the scripting tool really quickly here and put a branching in and zoom in. So the comparator only accepts bool. It can also accept integers in the fact of it will accept a 0 or a 1, 0 being false and 1 being true. For whatever the comparator is at the point when this branch is called, it will either execute from the true node or from the false node. Moving on, we have a switch node. And so this will take a primitive type as an input, so an integer, a string, or an enum, and it'll split the sequence by the input value. Let's say you were checking a trigger name and you have 10 triggers on the map and you want to check if it's one of 5 certain triggers. So you could have the trigger name as the value input and then the 5 trigger names in the slots. So if we take a look at it really quick. Now one thing I do want to mention about the switch is you do have to have a value connected to it to be able to add values for it to check in its list. So in this case, just do a variable here. Oops. So once you actually have a variable connected to the value, it'll allow you, and if you disconnect, it won't allow you to add any more. Going under that, we have the for loop node. This node makes the script run the body multiple times. The number of iterations is determined by the value of first, last, and increment parameters. This is just a simplified C# for loop. Finished sequence is taken after all the iterations are done. So if you have experience with programming in C# or if you've modded and programmed at all, you probably are familiar with one of these. Just a closer look at it. So as you see here, you can actually have variables determine what the first, the increment, and the last number are. So body, so this is what you would pull the sequence connection off if you want something to happen while it's counting. Here's the counter, you can pull that and that's a variable and that'll tell you what number it's currently at. So if it's between 0 and 10 and it's on number 5, pulling from the counter would give you a 5. And then finished is so you can continue on after this has been run. And it looks like that's it for sequence control nodes. We'll move on to script nodes. So script nodes represent other scripts defined and loaded in the editor. Has sequence input, output, and a set of defined value inputs and outputs. And it can block its sequence output, the node in sequence after it is not called, when the script's output node is not reached. So if we go in here really quickly and we attempt to put down a script, so you right click and you click script, you'll notice we'll get a drop down box and there's nothing in it. And that's because we don't have any scripts loaded. So really quickly, I'll just make a script for us to use. And that'll actually bring us to our next node here. I'll kind of go back and forth on these. So if you go with the guide and scroll down to the in-out node section, you have the input node, which is sequence dependent and is accessible only in general scripts. It defines a set of input parameters and one sequence output, and these parameters will be visible in the signature of the script. So if you go back over here, so when you're in a normal script, you'll get this, and it'll look like this, and you have your little sequence output. And so you just double click on the add new, and let's do a couple of variables here. And when you name it or whatever, just press enter. And it'll apparently didn't like what I had there. So there we go. And then we can put an output. Now I do want to make something clear here after I read this. So you have the output node, again, is only accessible in your general scripts. It defines a set of output parameters and one sequence input, and these parameters will be visible in the signature of the script. Now here's the problem. Let's say I add in a variable here. Let's just call it an integer, and So, in my experience, now this might change depending on when they update the VST, trying to pull in like a level script really quickly. I'll pull it in here so you can see it. As you can see now, we see that. Trying to pull this value and attach it to something that tries to pull a variable value will almost always give you an error, to the point of you will have to forcibly close your scripting tool to be able to get it to stop popping up. So in my experience, currently they can only be used on inputs. Only the variables can be accepted on the inputs. You can't pull it off of here. Now, going back to what it said about it can block its sequence output. So if we take a look here, you can see that if we were to just connect this, it would go straight from input to output. But let's say we put a branching in here, and we have this bool, so we connect the bool to the comparator, and we put the sequence control here. So let's say if that bool is false, we just want this to stop and not continue. And if it's true, we want it to continue outwards. So what'll happen is if this Boolean variable turns out to be false, this script will execute all the way to this branching node, and once it sees it's false, it'll stop. Now, if you had something on this script, like in here, like let's say you had a couple strings of nodes, those nodes will not, pretty much it stops in the script. It won't continue onto that point unless you go to an output node. And so by doing that, you can do checks that will prevent your main level script from running certain parts until certain parameters are met, and it can save you a little bit of time. The other thing that these general scripts are good for is if you have like a large section that repeats a lot, or you're going to use it a lot, but it has a lot of nodes in it, you can put them into a general script and reference them there from that, and it kind of helps to clean up your main script a little bit. And the last node that we're going to take a look at is the comment node. So if we go over here really quickly and do comment, as you can see here, you can resize it. And literally all this does is it's a comment. So you can label sections of your script and say, okay, this is a death check section, or this is a spawn handle section, or whatever you want to call it. And if you notice, it is always behind any nodes that are in its space. I have had occasional issues where after a load-in or something else, what'll happen is it'll end up being on top, and literally all I have to do is click in the corner and like drag it away, and you might have to delete it in some cases. But other than that, those are all the nodes we're going to have to go over. I will probably make a video later on Boolean gate logic. And that concludes this tutorial video. Next time, we'll take a really quick look at how Boolean gate logic works. But that is all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.